Thanks to everyone for joining. I'm Emma Wolf, VP and Climate Tech Lead at Kite PR. Kite is a B2B technology communications agency. We work with many companies within the climate tech sector as well as the broader B2B space. And the work we do kind of gives us a really broad view of trends that are going on across industries and helps us identify opportunities relating to storytelling and communication strategies. And I'm really excited today to have this great group of people on the line. We're going to talk through a lot of topics and trends, but really hope that we can showcase the importance of sustainability and climate communications. As we know, it's becoming a bigger and bigger priority for all types of businesses across all industries. So looking forward to a great conversation, but let's start with some introductions. Danny, you want to kick us off introducing yourself?
For sure. Thanks so much for having us here, Emma. It's going to be a good conversation. I'm Danny, and I'm the Chief Product Officer and one of the co-founders of Arbor. We are a Calgarian startup that is working on carbon accounting, so measuring the scope 1, 2, and primarily scope 3 impacts of businesses with a focus on product carbon footprints.
Fantastic. Olivia.
I'm Olivia Burka. I have a background in materials, electronics, innovation, and product development. And I've always been advocating for circularity, design for longevity, repair, and recyclability, as well as supply chain manufacturing, transformation, those areas. So I founded a company called Sustainable Future Lab, which is a consultancy that offers technology solutions, strategic vision and strategy, deep industry knowledge and best practices, as well as custom workshops.
Amazing. Thank you. And Nadine.
Well, thanks so much, Emma, for having me. Looking forward to a great conversation as well. I'm Nadine Trabolsi. I'm the VP of Marketing at Sapphire Technologies. We're a startup established in 2021. We design and manufacture a turbo expander generator that captures waste pressure energy from pressure reduction processes and converts that into clean electricity. Typical applications would be industrial applications for the oil and gas industry.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, lots of different perspectives. So I'm excited for a good conversation. Well, let's dive right in, just with some industry points of view, some industry thoughts. I'd love to hear from each of you as you're, thinking about what you're prioritizing, what you're thinking about, but then also what your, executives, your CEOs are thinking about. What's kind of the biggest priority right now? What's keeping you up at night?
I can go first. So on our side, a lot of the clients that we deal with, they're having what we're calling a demand squeeze in the industry, where governments, investors, employees, consumers, customers, everyone wants businesses to really walk the talk when it comes to climate. And so you can see it on the government side with regulations and legislations. Here in Canada, we have two newer ones. One's called Bill C-59, and it's anti-greenwashing legislation. There's also OSFI B-15, which is put in by the principal, the regulator for financial institutions here. And really what they're doing is creating a market where businesses now need to, A, calculate and report on all of their emissions, but then B, do it with the right methodology. And I think why we're here today with clear communication. And so what we're finding is businesses are being pressured to do this by all of their stakeholders in all of these different segments, but then they're also being pressured to do it properly and really, really clearly. So I think that right now is what is pushing a lot of demand in this industry.
And similarly, to add to that, for me too, along similar lines, is really companies actually achieving their net zero goals. Because to do it, for the most part, you need radical transformation. And we need to move faster on reducing our scope 3 emissions. And if companies aren't investing heavily in reducing their Scope 3 emissions, they're not going to reach their net zero targets. And sometimes it does require companies to drastically change their business models, which most companies aren't necessarily ready to do that in a short period of time. So that's a big part of what keeps me up at night. But then there's another aspect too of information overload. I think with those regulations and legislations, different acronyms, new updates to various different terminologies, different requirements across various different countries or products, it's hard internally to navigate it. So from a consumer point of view, I know it's even harder. And so I think what's scary too is I hope that consumers don't start thinking they don't have enough power to vote or to make an impact. I think sometimes people think that it's all on these big organizations, which it is for sure, but it's also on, it's everybody. We all have to be in it together. So those two aspects of overload of information and reaching net zero are big concerns for me.
I would say for us, so we're basically creating a new technology. We're implementing a new technology. So like with any new technology, whether it's hardware or software, it's inevitable to have setbacks, when it comes to deployment. So I think it's really important to recognize that's just a natural part of the process and be ready to tackle those challenges very efficiently. And I think additionally, in our case, we cater to an industry that is known to kind of have more of a conservative nature, kind of risk averse tendencies. So this definitely, I would say, has been a bit of a challenge for us as it extends our sales cycle, especially in North America compared to international markets. We found that international markets are quicker to adopt new technologies. So one example of that, sort of solution, I guess, that we've implemented to help us tackle that is the LAMP approach, which is a large account management process. It's really helped us to kind of identify and map out our key stakeholders in that relationship and ensure that we have the right stakeholders from our end, speaking with the right stakeholders from the customer's end, to kind of make sure that we're communicating as efficiently and effectively as possible. And that's definitely helped us move the process along a little bit faster.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to dive more into LAMP as we go into the conversation. But one other question, and Olivia, you kind of alluded to this as you were talking about the need to change our business models and really think about what innovation looks like in the future. You all have worked or are working at early or mid-stage companies. So I'd love to hear why and how even kind of the emphasis on scaling those early stage technologies is so critical in the industry right now.
Yeah, happy to start on this one. I think, of course, if you are a company that has the means to help early stage startups, I think you just have to, right? Because innovation is a key ingredient towards actually reaching a circular economy. There are so many thousands and thousands of solutions out there. And if we don't start implementing them, we just won't reach those targets, as I was mentioning. And we can't do that without early stage startups, because so much innovation happens within various different sectors, within various different industries. Helping them scale is what's going to help your company sustain itself as well. If, for example, from like a material perspective, if your company is having issues with finding a material replacement that has a lower carbon footprint, but then there's a startup that has a solution. They need the investment in order to scale. They need investment in order to get the type of manufacturing and quantities to help your business actually flourish in the future. So it's just really key. It's just part of the process. It's a key ingredient.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of being a startup is you get to sort of dedicate your whole company's being around one specific, very specific problem, where big organizations, they already have this established business model. And so for them to go out of their way to solve a very, very specific problem that is new to the market, it kind of alludes to what Nadine was talking about earlier about the risk aversion side of things. And for large organizations to go in and do this, it'll take a huge shift in mindsets, whereas startups are designed to solve this very niche sort of segmented problem. And that's why scaling is so important, especially with the scaling issues such as climate change. We need to be able to really help startups get their grounding and realize what these problems they're solving are, and help these large organizations in turn.
Yeah, and I think, I think for us, I know there are a few factors. I would probably highlight a couple. So on one hand, our mission is to drive global decarbonization. So the faster we're able to scale, the bigger the impact we're able to have on reducing carbon emissions offsets. So I think that's one aspect of it. The second aspect I would say is, in this, I think these are all tied together. It's important to kind of scale to enable innovation, enable competitiveness in the clean tech sector. And I think the more clean technology companies scale, the more they attract investment, which then leads to additional budgets for R&D, and that also can tie into cost reductions, and ultimately the end goal is to make clean technologies more accessible and affordable. I think a lot of clean technologies out there are cost prohibitive for a lot of companies. So I think it's a very kind of I guess those two things are tied together, but I would say, attracting investment, funding is obviously always a very important aspect of any startup, and then ultimately making those technologies more accessible and affordable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, we're seeing, or Danny, I guess you mentioned regulation and how that's always part of the conversation. And I think we're seeing what has become a real balancing act between the regulatory environment and the political environment. And brands are having to navigate that right now, which I think we always kind of have, but it feels a little more intense right now. So I'd love to hear, with the US election upcoming, multiple elections around the globe, how do you think, or do you think the conversation around sustainability and climate change will shift? And does that, do you think that has an impact on, how you as business leaders and marketers are approaching communications with your audiences?
Yeah, for sure. I can take first crack at this. And disclaimer, I'm Canadian, so I'm probably not best suited to speak on the US politics side of things, but I think governments are a catalyst, right? They can help speed things up, or they can slow things down. At the end of the day, they're just one piece of that demand squeeze that we spoke about earlier, where even if governments aren't pushing for this, consumers, employees, investors, they're all starting to take a look at the climate side of things. So I think government can play a role in speeding things up, especially if they do it properly with sort of regulations or legislations that make sense and can be executed on, and doesn't sort of create this huge reporting burden. But they can absolutely slow things down as well. And so I think only time will tell with the election down in the States, but should be fun to watch.
I agree. I fully agree with that. I think, you know, I mean, currently with the Inflation Reduction Act, I mean, there are several incentive programs out there to help clean clean tech businesses grow. But as Denny said, you know, we can definitely see it going both ways, right? So it just kind of depends on the outcome of the election. It could definitely slow things down. I mean, there's already been a bit of a backup in the pipeline of, you know, getting approvals on a lot of different clean energy projects out there. So, you know, it could slow it down or it could speed it up either way, but I guess it's a 50-50.
Yeah, I agree too with everything you guys have been saying. I think the only thing I can really add is from the people perspective, that every day I meet someone who's starting to enter the sustainability space or climate space, who's passionate, who's learning more. So whatever happens from a government point of view, more and more people want to do something. There are more and more companies every day who are trying to solve, to Danny's point too, these like niche problems that are needed. So regardless of what happens in 4 years, people will still make progress.
Yeah, another piece to add to that is the election in the States is one small piece of the pie, like globally, where it won't affect any regulations or directly affect any regulations that are being put in place in, let's say, the EU, like Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM. This is a regulation that the European Commission is putting in place to prevent what they're calling carbon leakage, which is them having a good or not so good hold of the carbon emissions within their jurisdiction. But people right now are going to other countries and importing goods. What CBAM is designed to do is to provide a tax on high emitting goods that are coming into the European Union. And so things like this will still be that government catalyst that is pushing for it, even if it's not directly within the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you all said about regulation and you know, just how the government is taking part in these conversations can either speed up or slow down progress made across the board. And I think that, you know, as communicators, we're always working to educate our end audiences, and we all have many different audiences that we're talking to, whether it is, you know, federal or local government, you know, our technology partners, consumers, investors. So I'd love to hear how you all navigate those conversations. You know, how do you think about, you know, the messaging that you have and the points that you're trying to make with those audiences? Nadine, you mentioned LAMP earlier. I'd love if you could kind of go into that a bit more. I think that would be really like a really helpful process for our listeners to hear about.
Sure. So LAMP specifically, the way we've used it at least, is primarily kind of creating a strategy around a specific customer and understanding what is our ultimate objective. And it really helps walk you through the different steps that you need to take to reach that goal, essentially. There are different processes out there. LAMP is just one of them. So it really kind of does provide that guideline of, you know, making sure you think it through to a point where you narrow it down from very high level objective all the way down to action items that each person on the team needs to take to help reach that ultimate goal. In terms of trying to kind of cater to different market segments, target audiences, etc., you know, I would say one thing that I've always done throughout my career is just ensure that I identify who my target audiences are, understand, you know, that behavior, that customer journey, and then develop tailored messaging that resonates with that specific target audience. And then we look at communication channels. What's the most effective way to reach those audiences? And then, you know, being able to obviously be as agile and flexible, because it is a digital world. And so we do have a little bit more the ability to kind of measure and performance in general, and try to kind of assess if our messaging is resonating with that audience. And then be able to kind of pivot if needed. And so I think agility and flexibility would definitely be a very important part of it. So yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of different things.
Yeah, on that point, I think there's two sides of sustainability communication. One is the internal communications within a company, and the other is external communications to outside stakeholders. What we found is really effective is where we're fighting for a cause that people are passionate about. And so if we can arm them with information that they can then go and distribute internally, talking about the benefits of carbon accounting, what that means for their bottom line, what that means for their risk, then they can get all of these other stakeholders on board, so that it's not just the sustainability team's sort of burden, it's also across all of these different departments. And when you get that buy-in, you start getting actual action as well. And so I'm sure Olivia knows a lot more about this than me, but if you can get your product design teams on board, then you can have a huge impact on your overall scope 1, 2, and 3. Whereas if it's just sort of in this reporting sphere, you're not going to have that much innovation. There was an IBM survey that just came out, and they surveyed over 5,000 C-suite executives, and they found that, and someone please fact check the numbers on this, but 43% of companies are spending 43% more on reporting than they are on sustainability innovation. And so if we can get these internal buy-ins from all of the different departments, then that's where this innovation and the actual action will come from.
I love each of your points, I think. So spot on. I mean, to Nadine's point, personally, I'm going to look into LAMP. I haven't used that yet, but I usually use the design thinking methodology, which can be quite similar. But especially, I use it for every aspect, whether it's innovation or communications. And to your point of really understanding customer segments, understanding who you're communicating with internally, externally, but for like your customer segments. Gen Z, like a Gen Z TikToker who you're communicating with, they're going to care about so many different things versus someone who lives in a small town who's a small business owner. Being mindful that they might both be your customer, but how do you start to communicate something very difficult in a very simple, easy to absorb information? And then even internally, like what I like to do is experiment internally, to see and get people's feedback if something makes sense. It can just be like a regular human conversation of, hey, these are some visuals I put together. Does this make sense to you? Is this working? If it doesn't work, go back, try it again. And the biggest thing I've learned too is repetition is okay. I think it's still something that I keep having to tell myself, because it feels like sometimes you're repeating yourself over and over again. But I think about even family, for example. If your family members, can they even describe what you do, like your day-to-day life? If your family members can't do that, are you communicating what you're genuinely passionate about to your audiences in the right way as well? So kind of like checking yourself as well and experimenting internally is always, I think, is always important. But yeah, I think there's also, to Danny's point too, this huge power in terms of empowering people internally to start talking and distributing information, especially from a life cycle analysis point of view. A lot of people don't know what life cycle analysis is. And then when you start to get people excited and understand it a little bit more, them talking about it is it's very cool, to simply put it.
Yeah, I love that. And at Kite Hill, we always say repetition is key. So knowing, continuing to communicate those messages, seeing what resonates, and tailoring from there, or evolving from there is super essential. Love that. This is a little bit more of a tactical question, but I think it'll resonate with a lot of our listeners. What advice do you have for communications, marketing professionals who are working with smaller teams and budgets? What should be a priority for those teams?
I'll take that one since I've definitely been dealing with that for the last couple of years. It's very challenging, right? But I would say, audience targeting, that is so important. And then the second thing I would say is creating valuable content. I think people underestimate how important that is. Again, I think it's just like this very noisy world, right? We're getting hit with so much stuff and information and news and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's important to really understand what we're trying to solve for, and make sure that we're creating that content that resonates, essentially, that we know people are interested in learning about. But in order to do that, we have to understand what the pain points are and how can we help address that with kind of engaging content. The other thing I would say, leveraging partnerships and collaborations is another one I would say is important. In a lot of cases, and we've been fortunate enough to have worked with some kind of well-known companies, and so ensuring that we're leveraging their strength, it definitely helps us kind of raise awareness and reach a wider audience. And my last advice would be to be creative, and not be afraid of doing something that has not necessarily traditionally been done in that particular way for that particular industry. I've worked in a lot of different industries, been in marketing my entire career, but marketing transcends industries. I keep saying that. And so my first 10 years of my career were in kind of more B2C. The last 12 have been more in B2B technology. But I have to say, those kind of first 10 formative years of my career have been very valuable because I've been trained to think very creatively. You do have to be a little bit more creative, typically on the B2C side, changing now potentially on the B2B side. But so I've definitely been able to bring a lot of that into more of the B2B communication side of things. And I've noticed that it really helps. And so traditionally, I would do something that's traditionally not a B2B thing, but then it turns out, oh my gosh, it got, people really enjoyed that, or they really like this, or, so I think just being creative and being able to adapt to different scenarios and environments, and not being afraid to try new things.
Yeah, I can add on to that. I think focusing on three things. First and foremost, the problem you're solving. What is that problem? Who does it apply to? Who are you helping with this? Second one is the solution you're offering. So what exactly is it? And then third one is why you're different, why you stand out in the market, what makes you unique and special, and what should make people want to choose your products or your services or your goods. And then wrapping those three within just making it as clear and understandable as possible so that people can really understand problem, solution, what makes you different.
Very good point. I would just want to add something to that. The other challenge I would say, I've typically worked for engineering-led organizations, so we've always had to play the role of like translating, more complex technology into more digestible terms. And it's always a struggle internally. I would find that it's been too dumbed down. But what I think a lot of, and this is not a dig on engineers, but it's a little bit of a challenge, right? It's finding that right balance of, keep it simple, right? The simpler it is, the better and more effective you'll be. But then at the same time, they're like, oh my goodness, that's just really dumbing it down. That's not right. And so I think it's just really trying to convince those engineering minded folks, that it is okay to simplify things to a degree that is understandable and easy to follow and digest. And that applies to anything, including press releases, any kind of marketing materials, websites, copy, etc. The jargon is incredibly, it's counterproductive. Technical terms, incredibly counterproductive. There's a time and a place for those conversations to happen. It's just certainly not happening in the early stages of the communication process.
Yeah, I think especially in the sustainability and climate tech sphere, like I have this funny screenshot saved on my phone, and it was I sent, CSRDD posted a new thing, and my CEO is like, what the hell is with these acronyms? Like there's just so many, right? It's just all alphabet soup, and they all sort of mix and mingle all over the place. So that's what makes it difficult for people to understand, is because it's not simple when they're trying to make it simple. And it's sort of that engineering debacle you went into a little bit.
Yeah, again, both of your points, couldn't have said anything better. But to add to that, a lot of engineering teams too, they might get excited about a certain change or swap or improvement, but it doesn't translate to the audience. It's way too complicated. And if you're trying to make something, let's say, more energy efficient, and you're able to do that by 5%, let's say on like 5 products, nobody actually, unfortunately, like it cares. It's not a strong enough story or communications tool. It just creates more confusion on the consumer side. So from that perspective of working with everybody as early as possible to understand, let's say the marketers have a goal and they want to communicate an improvement within your team. Let's say they want to reach 100% on something, getting kind of, let's say they have a creative idea, to Nadine's point, they want a bigger story. But communicating the scale of that early on to engineers, to designers, so that they understand that it's not just one thing they're fixing or improving on. They have to do it for the portfolio of products. And I'm talking from a consumer product perspective, so that might not be necessarily translatable for software, for other aspects, but hopefully it is. But then also for partnerships, if you're on a lower budget, one thing I'd add to the partnerships aspect is mutual, like what's the mutual benefit towards the people you want to work with, and what are you actually providing them? Be specific with what you can offer, because the less specific you are, it slows down a ton of various different types of communications and strategies that it just won't go anywhere. So
Yeah,
wanted to add that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes back to knowing your audience, regardless of what activity you're doing. Yeah. The only thing I would add to that, and this is kind of building off of what all of you have said, is one thing that I think is really essential for early stage companies who are working to get, more publicity and leveraging their marketing materials is to really make your content work hard for you. So if you have, one proprietary data point that you're like, this is great, or if you have a case study, which of course is like the holy grail for marketers and communicators, think about how you can leverage it across multiple channels in different ways. So, integrating that within your social media approach, whether it's earned media, so podcasts or interview opportunities, can you turn it into a full-on announcement and press release? So really thinking about how you can, make it work hard for you, and kind of get in front of your audiences in multiple different ways. It goes back again to that repetition as well. And that really drives conversations and visibility. Great. One thing that is I don't know if it's fun, but it's kind of fun to talk about. I think oftentimes we see in sustainability and climate change conversations, there are always conversations about have that like doomsday undertone. And I think it's just because as a society, that's a great way to catch eyeballs. So how, as a communicator and as a business leader, how do you circumvent that? How do you kind of work around those doomsday storylines to make, to motivate people and get them excited and involved?
Yeah, I would say always just focus on the good, because sustainability at the end of the day, it is better. Focus on all the incredible things it can give you. This New York Climate Week, I was just attending Solutions House that's organized by the company Futera, which is co-founded by Solitaire Townsend. And she was saying something that I think is really important, really key, is that sustainability actually improves every aspect of your life. You'll get better sleep. You'll have a healthier lifestyle. You'll have more time with your kids, your loved ones. And it's just important to find your audiences and tell them that, explain that. So it really isn't all doomsday. There's so much excitement towards innovation, towards improvements on every level. But doomsday stuff sells really well, unfortunately, but it shouldn't.
I definitely think that climate fatigue is becoming a bit of a growing concern. And I think people are starting to kind of just become very overwhelmed and desensitized by the continuous barrage of negative news and doomsday predictions. I think it's becoming even more and more important. I mean, storytelling is always incredibly critical part of marketing and communications, but I think now more than ever, I would say it's important to really incorporate kind of storytelling that highlights both the impacts of climate change and the benefits of addressing those challenges. So really trying to kind of share, stories that humanize the issue and demonstrate the tangible effects of climate change on communities and ecosystems, but also, incorporating the positive outcomes of, what adopting sustainable practices and technologies would look like, to try to kind of inspire more empathy and action and hope. So I think it's very important to kind of strike a balance in the messaging, not only, focusing on just the urgency and the seriousness of the issue, but also the potential solutions and, the many opportunities that we all have for positive change.
Yeah, I think my point of view is we need to be optimistic yet realistic. And that's getting away from that doom side of things. But then I think also just being creative and like almost light with the messaging around it. I watched this great video on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, and it was this activist who is going to talk to one of the largest asset managers in the UK. And instead of him writing a nasty letter or harassing the CEO, he went and created a video game and strapped it to his back about different things people could do as an asset manager to fight climate change and the climate crisis. And I think I love seeing stuff like that. It is just it to me gets the message across so much better than this doom and gloom, the world is ending, everything's on fire, because we've all heard that before, right? We've heard it time and time again. But how many times have you heard of a guy with a video game strapped to his back? The creativity and then the optimism, but realism, I think, are very important to have.
I love that. Awesome. All right, we're getting close to our time, so I want to do some rapid fire questions, and we'll keep responses pretty brief, but would love to hear from all of you. Which companies have gotten sustainability messaging right and why, kind of in recent history, do you think?
This one's hard because I feel like I haven't necessarily seen a single company who's doing it perfectly. I don't think there's like a perfect way. From a design perspective, and only from a very high level corporate perspective, obviously because you have to go through so many different political things internally and it takes forever. Apple does create very simple communications on little bits of progress. I'm not saying they're investing enough. I'm not advocating for them, but there's some communication tools that they use that's quite nice. From like a more sustainable company perspective, though, the company Fairphone, you know, they design for longevity, for repair, they create spare parts. There's huge inspiration in terms of what they're doing that can be taken across so many different aspects for various different industries.
Yeah, I tell people in this industry that perfect is the enemy of good, or perfect is the enemy of great, where a lot of people are worried about the communication they put out, but there are safe harbors in place where if you are doing everything in your power to be able to do it properly, not mislead anyone, come out with really clean methodology and data behind things, then there shouldn't be anything to worry about, right? It shouldn't be perfect we're striving for, because that's a long time away. On your question, Emma, I think recency bias, we just did some work with Crocs, and I really like how they have it laid out, because they have past what their baselines are for all things climate, but then present, future, and how they're getting to that future point. So they have targets, but they also talk about not just this sort of pie in the sky vision saying, yeah, we want to be net zero by X date, but they're talking about those steps that they're going to take to get there, and how those will have an actual impact on their scope 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, yep. Progress over perfection is great. And that incremental kind of transparency, that's super important.
I would say Patagonia, honestly. I've been really amazed by what they've done. They're not just kind of talking the talk, but they're walking the walk. So when they say that they are, you know, concerned about the environment and sustainability practices, they're actually doing something about it. And so they've had so many different initiatives and campaigns to essentially ensure that they're being as, you know, sustainable as they can be, and in supporting also a lot of like just nonprofits, etc. So I think that's a really wonderful example of what good activism would look like.
Great. If you had to provide one like pro tip for the way for an organization to approach sustainability communications, just communications in general, what would it be? What's the top priority?
I would say on the communication side, simplicity, and just hit those points that you know you're talking about, so people can really understand what it is you're trying to get across, right? If you come out with this huge elaborate story talking about your net zero goals and all of the different things you could take to possibly get there, it's going to get lost on a lot of readers. If you talk about like what I said in the last example, your baselines, your past, your present, where you are now, the future, and your targets, and then more importantly, how you're going to get to those targets, I think that is a great starting point for any sustainability communication.
I would say authenticity. I think authenticity is a little bit underrated. Everyone's trying to kind of use superlatives and like just trying to be as big and grand as possible to, you know, be as impactful as possible. But I think that people underestimate the importance of authenticity in terms of, you know, it helping build trust with stakeholders and customers. So I think, just making sure that, you're being true to yourself and you're being authentic in your messaging and in your approach, I think is one of the most important things.
For me, I would say work with your legal team early on. Get them involved. That might be more relevant for larger companies, but if your legal team understands your roadmap, they can help you simplify the messaging too. They can help you say what you can or can't say, because ultimately you don't want to be greenwashing. And if you have your legal team involved, they'll help, right? That's what they're there for. They'll help with understanding what you're actually trying to achieve, and it's just safer. So yeah.
Yeah, great advice. I'm going to throw one more question out there that we didn't discuss, so you're going to have to think on your feet. But what is one trend or conversation that's happening within the industry that you think communicators, marketers, even business leaders should really be paying attention to over the next year?
I love this question. I think net zero as a whole and what you can consider towards net zero. So if you're considering offsets, if you're considering your scope 1, 2, 3, if you're considering there's a sort of newer framework coming out called avoided emissions. The whole framework is not supposed to be used for net zero, but what it does is shows you the difference between your solution and the market business as usual. I think to Nadine's point about authenticity, including these things where it doesn't make sense will lead to disasters and PR nightmares. Where if you can just be authentic about exactly what you're doing as a business and really have good data all the way down, then you should be golden.
For me, a trend that's been going on for many years, but I hope to see it more and more this year too, is really the right to repair movement, and secondhand, making secondhand not feel weird, especially from an electronics point of view. I think the newer generations are very comfortable with secondhand clothing. I think it's slowly still catching on with various different generations. Personally, I only wear secondhand clothing, but from an electronics point of view as well, empowering people not to be as scared to just get something fixed. I hope becomes more and more prominent, because especially in the United States, people take back whatever they want to take back. There are so many returns, and it's a real problem.
Great. Nadine, any thoughts?
I would say, yeah, I mean, I would say the emergence of AI and how fast that's growing. I think people, it's a little bit polarizing. It's one of those type of topics. You're not sure, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? I think that I think we all have seen some of the benefits that we can get from AI, but I think that it does have a pretty significant role in helping accelerate the development of clean technologies. But again, I think it's going to be a little bit of a controversial sort of area of the clean tech space, or of any industry really. But clean tech is also one of those potentially impacted areas, and there's always kind of two sides to this debate. Some people are very anti-AI, some people are very pro-AI. But I think it's yet to be seen. I think that AI definitely has a role if managed wisely and correctly. I think it does have a pretty important role in innovation and development, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And I think now we're going to start to see the shift from, companies touting their AI capabilities to the demand to see how are you validating that? What are the outcomes of using AI, and what does that mean for your business and for, innovation within the space? Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for the great conversation. I think 3 like key takeaways from my point of view are around being laser focused on your goals, your mission, your vision, and having that lead your communications. Transparency and simplicity in that communications, making sure that you're having those conversations in a very transparent way, and of course knowing your target audience, and making sure that what you're saying is resonating with those audiences, is only going to keep pushing the message forward. But thank you to all of our panelists. Thanks for everyone for listening in. I think you can find us all on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with you and continue the conversation. So feel free to reach out. But yeah, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of Climate Week.